Welcome back to the channel, guys, and yes guys, it's over to the legendary Bugatti Chiron, and hello to the all new Bugatti Tourbillon, and this is the all new Chiron replacement, guys, with the 8.3 liter naturally aspirated V16 as its internal combustion engine with a triple electric motor setup, one connected to the gearbox in the back and two electric motors on the front axle, giving it a complete combined power output of 1800 horsepower and 2300 Newton meters of torque, all-wheel drive of course, and a quintessential Bugatti look. I mean, right off the bat you can see the complete proper quintessential Bugatti horseshoe grille with the 8-eye layout. Of course, they have been properly tamed down in terms of the size, and they are properly angled downwards to properly match the low and wide proportions of the car, and they are properly calling these, i.e. the proper gaps between the proper front nose of the car and the proper headlights, they are called the complete flying fenders, and they in fact have vents, i.e. the vents underneath the headlights actually take in the air, and on top of that the radiators are actually positioned beside the complete front bonnet, which on its own is very small to begin with, but still has a decent amount of storage that goes all the way to the bottom floor of the car. And on top of that, the radiators obviously behind the complete horseshoe grille actually are beside the complete proper storage facility, i.e. meaning that they go underneath it and they come out from the vents on top of the bonnet, as you guys can see, and this allows for a way more bigger shoulder line that extends on towards the door and further on towards the back. And I mean, the looks on their own are properly astonishing to begin with, and of course this is the first ever Bugatti to have dihedral doors, and well, that on its own completely ups the look by a million times margin on its own, and with the proper roof moving with the door, that allows for an even more elegant and way more better way, or a way more convenient way of getting in. And the proper look on its own, guys, I mean, it maintains the quintessential proper look, and when you go to the side you see the proper outline of the cabin on its own. Obviously on the Chiron it was very prominently a C, and now it's properly a complete different design due to the fact that the proper frontal area, i.e. the height has been decreased, it's way more shorter, but the complete cabin space is exactly the same. But of course, when you properly compare it with the fact that the proper gearbox in the Chiron on its own was connected to the engine, ahead of the engine in fact, such that it properly protruded into the cabin, such that the proper space between each seat was properly a lot. And now obviously with the fact that the gearbox is behind the engine, same along with the third electric motor in the back, this means that the proper space between the proper seats is very much closer, i.e. a way more narrower space, with the fact of the complete greenhouse effect also being way more inward, i.e. the glasses, the windshield, the windows and all that, everything is way more compactly packed. But on top of that, it still has the exact same seating space as you got in the Chiron, and on top of that, a complete carbon fiber body with a carbon fiber monocoque with semi-fixed seats on its own, which means that you can properly change the elevation and you can change the proper angle of the backrest, but you cannot move it front or back. But in proper consideration of that, the proper pedal box can be moved such as to fit the most tallest people in the world. But nevertheless, guys, this is a proper beauty to look at, and we've got a shit ton of details to go through. And when you go towards the back, this is where things get really monstrous. I mean, just take a look at that rear 3/4 profile and a menacing proper diffuser on its own, which actually properly generates way more downforce, such that at the highest speeds the complete rear wing does not deploy, it literally plays no role. And on top of that, it's got some massive Veyron tunnels that extend on all the way to the underneath of the seats. And one of the main things that Mate made the proper Veyron tunnels work in such a way such as to completely deem the wing completely useless is in high speeds, is to the fact that it is properly angled at a proper angle of 11 degrees, and if it is any more or less, the proper contact of the air to the ground and the diffuser is properly nothing, so thereby completely deeming that useless. Hence the proper angle is stuck at a proper angle of 11 degrees, thereby generating so much more downforce such that the complete wing on its own is completely deemed useless. But of course, the active wing does work in handling mode, i.e. track mode, as well as an air brake of course. But nevertheless, in terms of top speed, this thing tops out at a whopping speed of 276 miles per hour or 445 kilometers an hour, and that's the limited top speed. So of course, this is still the first ever variant, so we can expect some top speed variants along the way. And of course, it's time for some proper full-fledged bliss of the NA V16 with a 9500 RPM Redline. Well guys, a 9,500 RPM Redline and one of the most unique engine notes we've ever heard with an all new configuration, i.e. the V16, and of course the displacement has been increased whereas other marquees are properly downsizing. Meanwhile, Bugatti on the other hand have upsized from 8 liters to 8.3 with the naturally aspirated V16, and that is the main reason for this having one of the best engine notes we've ever heard and also being one of the most unique engine notes, and with a 9,500 RPM Redline, way more than the complete Porsche GT3s on its own, and well, that on its own is completely monstrous to begin with. And the overall looks, guys, I mean, it is a quintessential Bugatti on its own, and on top of that, the complete rear end with the floating exhaust tips, where of course it in fact properly ejects out vented air from underneath them as well as from underneath the tail light, and it's a proper single piece tail light with the Bugatti lettering completely flush with the tail light, and of course the tail light properly throws it back to something else, either La Voiture Noire and also something else that is not Bugatti, i.e. a car which on its own is over a decade old, i.e. the McLaren P1, but nevertheless it's most likely the La Voiture Noire, but nevertheless a beautiful single solo tail lamp on its own with the proper pneumatic wing properly sitting flush. I mean, for the most part, because of the fact that we hardly have pics of the wing up, of course we do, but right now nothing has been deemed with the fact of the wing being up, and with the wing up I am telling you guys it looks way more menacing than it properly does with the wing down. And of course, I mean, the proper diffuser on its own is a complete conversation starter on its own. I mean, just look at the massive gaping Venturi tunnels, and well, with the fact that it properly starts on from right underneath the seats and properly makes its way to knee level height on its own, and that is a fact, guys. Knee level height is where the proper diffuser ends, and that on its own properly shows how big that is, and that also shows how much downforce that this will generate, and that is a lot because the numbers are yet to be revealed, but it has been properly aerodynamically tuned to be a proper top speed king. And of course the proper 276 mile an hour top speed is a limited top speed, and of course only 250 of these will ever be made. And speaking of a proper design queue, there's a proper center line of course that extends on from the front of the car all the way through to the back, and another thing they properly made is that they ditched the double wiper setup with a complete mono wiper setup, and they've kept it completely in the middle to of course continue on that central line, and that on its own becomes a complete floating buttress over the exposed engine bay, which on its own is in fact a tail light, but of course when the wing goes up you cannot see the tail light on its own, and of course this is to properly adhere to the complete homologation rules. But Bugatti have thought ahead of the curve, and there is in fact a miniature headlight right underneath the wing, thereby showcasing 3 or properly 2 tail lights in play with the wing up on its own or down as well. But nevertheless, guys, another main thing is the exposed engine bay, and that is not some fake engine cover, that is the proper top head of the NAV16 on its own, and that on its own is completely monstrous and a proper beauty to look at. But of course it has been properly prepped for all conditions, such as if rainwater goes inside or if anything properly normal were to go inside, of course it will properly adhere to it and work as normally as it will. And this is one of the main things with Bugatti, it's a proper Jekyll and Hyde, and that carried on from the Chiron onto the Tourbillon on its own, with it being a proper daily grocery getter. Meanwhile on the other hand, packing an 1800 horsepower powertrain, and with the complete all-wheel drive setup, it's going to be a proper monster, and with some stupidly fast acceleration times. And well, talking about acceleration times, it can go from 0 to 62 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour in under 2 seconds, whereas the proper Chiron Super Sport on its own, i.e. the proper variant that packs Thor, i.e. the 1600 horsepower Quad Turbo W16, that could go from 0 to 60 in a proper time of 2.3 seconds. Meanwhile, let's carry on with the stats of the Tourbillon, 0 to 124 miles an hour or 200 kilometers an hour in under 5 seconds. Now that is F1 grade acceleration on this. Of course that goes hand in hand with the fact of the complete electric motor setup, i.e. the 2 at the front that power the front axle. Meanwhile the engine solely powers the rear axle, and on top of that a 0 to 186 mile an hour time or 300 kilometer an hour time of under 10 seconds, and then further on a 0 to 248 mile an hour time or 400 kilometer an hour time of under 25 seconds. Some stupidly fast times right there, and well, F1 grade acceleration on its own. And it's obviously got a 25 kilowatt an hour battery pack on its own, which on its own is very substantial for a car of this caliber, and that on its own weighs in at a proper monstrous weight of 200 kilograms. And with this complete setup, i.e. a triple electric motor setup on its own, a 25 kilowatt an hour battery, and a way more longer engine on its own, although it's narrower, it's longer because of course the W16 had an irregular piston or cylinder placement. Meanwhile, this has properly two banks of 8 cylinders right behind each other, thereby making this a way more longer engine and at the same time making it narrower. But of course, the proper length of the car on its own is just 27 millimeters more than that of the Chiron, which of course was properly told by the designers to keep it as the same size. But due to the proper length of the V16, it had to be extended by 27 millimeters, and the proper engine size on its own increased by 44 millimeters lengthwise on its own. And there is of course a proper handout due to the fact of the V configuration and the cylinders being placed right behind each other. But nevertheless, coming back to the battery pack on its own, with all this stuff, a triple electric motor setup, 2 on the front axle, 1 connected to the gearbox, a 25 kilowatt an hour battery pack, and a bigger engine, i.e. an 8.3 liter NA V16. With all this thing still weighs in at less than a Bugatti Chiron, which on its own weighs in at around 1995 kilograms, just under 2 tons. Meanwhile, this packing more power, more proper technical stuff, and this thing still weighs in at less than a Bugatti Chiron. The proper number is yet to be revealed, but Mate himself has said that it is definitely lighter than that of the proper Chiron, and that is not all. The main reason for this lightness is due to the proper implementation of 3D printing, the better part of the suspension components, and this is properly done by a proper AI software where it properly goes through every single component, finalizes it, properly gets it through the proper testament, and seeing that it is properly roadworthy, and at the same time being properly lightweight of being a 3D printed component, it is properly packing massive tensile strength such that it can properly be beaten around, such as a proper Bugatti should be. And that is exactly the type of implementation that makes Bugatti, while keeping it light, packing out more power, packing out more technical bits, and keeping it lighter than a car which had the exact same sort of an engine, i.e. the same amount of cylinders, but nevertheless that packed 4 turbos. This has a naturally aspirated engine, you get my point, but nevertheless this has more electric and technical bits, and this thing is still lighter than that of the Bugatti Chiron. Well, if that doesn't spit out the word Bugatti, I don't know what does. And the overall look, guys, I mean, I'm a massive sucker on its own for the complete open engine bay look, and with the floating buttress, i.e. the complete center line that sticks on from the bonnet all the way to the back, the proper mono tail light on its own with the Bugatti lettering just casually sitting there, and the massive diffuser, the complete floating exhaust tip similar to what you find on the SF90 and the SVJ, but these look way more better, way more properly futuristic, and the overall look of the car on its own is properly like a concept car. But this is in fact the final production variant. Of course, they are properly fine-tuning a couple of the things, but that is on the inside. The better part of what you see as the exterior is the final car that will make it on to the production line, and that on its own is completely mind-boggling. That's such a car which on its own looks futuristic, completely like a concept on its own, is the proper production car, and that on its own is completely mind-blowing. And one of the main things that Mate himself told is, if you place yourself right in the proper view of the rear 3/4, you will see that the proper rear axle actually looks like it protrudes out more than that of the front axle, but that is due to the fact of the body lines completely going inward before completely coming out towards the complete rear fenders, and that on its own gives it a very masculine and muscular look on its own, i.e. the proper shoulders on its own that extend on from the bonnet towards the door, and with the fact of that, it properly gives it a very muscular look. But of course, the axles are quite literally the same width, it just looks like that, and that effect on its own is called the Coke bottle effect. But nevertheless, the proper battery pack on its own weighs in at 200 kilograms, and of course, each proper electric motor puts out 400 horsepower on its own individually, giving it a proper combined output of 1200. But due to the limitation of the 25 kilowatt an hour battery, the output is properly decreased, but nevertheless 800 horsepower from the electric motors alone, that is still a significant amount. And in terms of the electric range, this has a proper range of around 60 to 70 kilometers, which is very good for a car of this caliber. And on top of that, this being a proper high level multi-level hypercar on its own, with this being a quintessential Bugatti, the looks, the proper power output on its own, although some people are saying it is lower than what they expected, it is a proper quintessential Bugatti and definitely a worthy successor to the legendary Bugatti Chiron on its own. And I mean, guys, what else could you want as a proper Chiron successor? I mean, just look at the complete rear end with the exposed tires, the proper solo mono tail light, the massive, very menacing diffuser with the gaping Venturi tunnels, and of course that proper bliss of that NA V16. I mean, a 9.5k RPM Redline on its own, that on its own is completely monstrous to begin with. And of course, I mean, what else could you ask for, guys? And now we move on to the interior on its own, which on its own is a complete work of art. Starting off with the fact of course, with the fact that they have proper semi-fixed seats. As I said, they properly can be moved up or down, but they cannot be moved front or back due to the fact of the complete proper narrower proper cabin. But of course, the pedal box can be moved. And further on, we move on to a very proper key invention that properly determined the name, i.e. Tourbillon, which on its own is actually a proper term used in watchmaking, which on its own is properly implemented to the most intricate and the most complex proper watchmaking internal workings of all. And well, that proper word on its own carried on over to the fact of this, and that also means that we have gotten a complete analog gauge, and with the proper workings of what makes the proper gauge cluster tick, it is a proper conversation starter on its own, with the fact of course you've got your proper top speed or proper speed gauge on its own in the center, with the RPM gauge in the middle, with of course you've got two needles, the smaller one being the RPM gauge and the bigger one being the speed, and then on the right you've got your horsepower readout, the bigger one being for the ICE or the NAV16 and the smaller one being for the electrical output, and on the left you've got a couple temperature gauges, the fuel gauge, and of course an analog readout of your electric capacity of the battery, and on top of that the proper 9500 RPM Redline on its own, that is properly bliss to begin with. And of course this does in fact have a proper screen, whereas now in fact there is a proper rule such that it is a homologation rule to have an infotainment screen, but Bugatti have worked around it such that of course the screen is present, but if you do not want the screen, such as you want to do a complete digital detox, because of course we're completely surrounded by screens everywhere, you can properly hit a button and this will go right back into the dashboard and it will look like there's nothing in its place. And now that's something that I love, and of course you get your complete Android Auto and Apple CarPlay and all that basic stuff that you get on an infotainment screen in your car. But nevertheless, this is for all of them, i.e. the analog fans out there who don't want a big screen in their face, and well, I am definitely one of them. And one of the main things is a central console on its own, which also is in fact a proper clear and transparent cover, as you guys can see the proper workings and mechanics of the switches, and this on its own is in fact not plastic but proper highly machined out sapphire crystal glass on its own, and this is properly scratch resistant, and they properly had to throw dummy heads to test the fact that this doesn't crack and probably break and go all over, and well, that's a cool fact. But this is properly machined sapphire crystal glass on its own, and well, that's a proper beautiful factor. And with the fact that this is a proper scratch resistant complete material, it makes things even more better, meanwhile keeping the proper analog feel and giving it a proper artistic feel. I mean, the look of it on its own is properly beautiful to begin with. And of course now we move on to one of the main things, i.e. the steering wheel, which on its own is in a complete different realm of its own, because they have properly brought out a new proper system called the fixed hub steering wheel, which on its own means that the central hub stays still but the steering wheel itself only moves without the central hub. And as you guys can see, this is a very cool and very quirky thing, something that I was on the fence about when I properly saw it, but now I've grown to love it because of the complete quirkiness and the cool unique factor to it, and with the fact that the paddles are in fact properly connected to the steering wheel, and this is properly done to properly allow full visibility of the gauge cluster and thereby improve the complete engagement of the driver with the car on its own. And the gauge cluster on its own is a very big distracting thing due to the fact that the proper mechanics and the proper hubs and wheels and all the things that you see inside are properly internal workings that make the complete gauge cluster tick. They are not just for show, they are the proper internal workings of the gauge cluster, and they on its own, i.e. the complete proper components, and the complete gauge cluster on its own is properly assembled by Swiss watch horologists, and this on its own, i.e. the complete gauge cluster on its own, consists of over 600 individual components, thereby just showing the proper level of intricacy and all the stuff that properly goes into the very gauge cluster, and that on its own is a very beautiful detail, and keeping it along the lines of being a proper modern / analog hypercar. And one of the main things that Mate wanted to achieve with the Tourbillon was the fact that this should be remembered and this should be timeless for its age, even from 100 years or 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now, it should look like a masterpiece. And that's exactly why they have properly put in the feature of the removable screen, because of course screen will always be outdated at whatever point in time you are, because if you just go back 2 decades, it was in the Veyron when people were slowly starting to put in the proper awkward digital screens into cars, and well, that was a time when the proper era of big digital screens was making its debut, and now we've gotten to the point of it becoming a homologation rule on its own, and well, that just shows how far the proper automobile sector on its own has properly evolved. But nevertheless, the proper fixed hub steering wheel system on its own is properly mind-blowing, and it does in fact have a planetary gearbox in the very central hub to of course make the proper paddles work, because as you guys can see, it's properly connected to the steering wheel and not to the proper central hub, and that's exactly why the proper planetary gearbox is necessary, and also to make sure that the proper wheel turns seamlessly, and also with the fact that the main fact of this very feature is of course to have and properly give proper full visibility of the beauty of that complete analog gauge cluster. And well, that on its own is going to be a completely distracting fact, other than of course the NA V16, which on its own completely revs to 9500 RPM. And well guys, the proper interior is simple through the central tunnel, no big screens whatsoever other than that one that can literally disappear at the command of the driver, and very simple, very put together. And well, that's exactly what Bugatti is. It's simple yet completely complex, and at the same time gives it one of the most artistic looks. And well, this is definitely an art piece to look at. And another one of the main things that Mate wanted to achieve was that whatever piece you pull up the car, you can literally put it on the wall or just put it up for display, and it on its own should be a piece of artwork to look at. And I'm pretty sure that box has definitely been ticked with the all new Tourbillon. And well guys, I mean, what else could you ask for? I mean, with the fact that this packs a triple electric motor setup, a 25 kilowatt an hour battery, which on its own charges from 0% to 80% in just 20 minutes. Take that, Tesla. And on top of that, with all this new electric doohickeys, it is still lighter than that of a solar internal combustion engine only power plant in the Chiron, which on its own weighed in at just under 2 tons. And well, that itself shows the complete proper level of how they are properly leveled up in terms of what type of carbon grade composites they are using to properly create the complete car on its own, i.e. it's aero grade carbon fiber composites that are actually being used to properly create the car, i.e. the monocoque, the complete skeleton of the car, which as you guys can see, which on its own is properly a beauty to look at. It just shows the complete underpinnings of what is a beautiful exterior vehicle, but when you look at the internal workings, it just shows what goes on underneath, meanwhile being light while also packing the proper highest amount of tensile strength that you'd want in a car or hypercar of this caliber. And well, it delivers on every front that a Bugatti should. I mean, with a 9.5k RPM Redline, you can never go wrong. And well, we are forgetting one thing, i.e. price, where this will be starting off with a proper price tag of 3.8 million euros, where of course the proper Chiron started off with 2.6 million euros. But if you properly throw in inflation into the proper equation, it is actually the same price, but inflation drew it up. And well, I mean, you're getting an NA V16 in a Bugatti with dihedral rows, with this complete proper unique interior, with the proper fixed up steering wheel setup, with a planetary gearbox, and with the fact of a disappearing screen. I can go on and on about all the proper unique things that the proper Tourbillon offers in terms of the interior. But one thing's for sure, it is a massive hit and a success, or in our words, a W. And of course, you've also got some dials to the left and right of the central hub, where first off on the right of the central hub, you've got a dial that properly helps you select your engine modes, where of course you've got 4 of them, starting off with HVR, the complete hybrid setup, where you can properly completely opt out to open the taps of the complete electrical system, as well as the ICE, i.e. the NAV16, i.e. unleashing the complete 1800 horsepower output to all 4 wheels. And then on the right, you've got EV, which is none other than the complete all electric option, and this can be opted in a complete scenario, whereas if you don't want to wake up your neighbors with the growl of a 9.5k RPM Redline of the NAV16 on its own. But nevertheless, I'm pretty sure this option is what us petrolheads will definitely choose the better part of the time. And by the better part of the time, I mean 100% of the time, i.e. ICE, full internal combustion engine baby, where we are completely unleashing the taps of only the NAV16 and shutting down the complete electric system, thereby no electric resistance, thereby no electric muffling, thereby all 1000 horsepower completely opened up. And of course, in EV, you've got the 800 horsepower completely opened up, and then you've got EC, which is none other than electric charge, which basically uses the engine to completely recharge up the battery. And well, that does it for the multiple engine modes on its own. And well, I'm pretty sure the option is that every single petrol head in us will definitely want to go for. And on the left of the central hub, we've got a complete new setting called the chassis setting, whereas you've got Bugatti, Sport, Track, and Personalization, or a complete customized one, such that which can be set by the driver on his own. So this completely regulates the complete chassis settings, makes it stiffer, makes it comfortable, and thereby you can literally pick whatever your poison is. And well, thereby you are properly selecting the type of drive you'd want in your Bugatti Tourbillon. And of course, a complete new set of Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s have specifically been developed for the all-new Tourbillon, such that they can withstand higher speeds than that of the Bugatti Chiron. And of course, the speed key is definitely on the books. I mean, it's a quintessential Bugatti. A speed key is definitely there, and of course it is most likely going to be plugged in the central console. And well, what do you guys think? I mean, by the looks, the proper intricacies, especially of the beautiful gauge cluster, I mean that on its own is a major distracting piece aside of the NA-V16. I mean a 9.5k RPM Redline, and we have jumped from the burble of a Quad Turbo W16 to an NA-V16 with a 9500 RPM Redline, and well, you can never go wrong with that. And the complete overall aerodynamic profile of this is way more superior than that of the Bugatti Chiron. I mean, solely for the fact that this is properly inspired by the master of the skies, i.e. the Peregrine Falcon, what with the complete proper lower, proper height, and how everything properly shapes out to be. It is properly tuned for highest speeds as well as immense downforce. And well, that's what Bugatti is, guys. They're properly setting new bars every time where they go. And of course, not to forget the proper menacing and a very beautiful look with the dihedral doors open. I mean, that on its own is a first for Bugatti. And what with all the stuff such that this having so much more technical doohickeys than that of the Chiron, either triple electric motor setup, the 25 kilowatt an hour battery, a longer engine, and a way more bigger stance on its own, and it still is lighter than that of the Chiron. And well, if you need anything else to describe a Bugatti, well, look no further. And well, I mean, all the way since it has progressed, all the way from the EB110, from a quad turbo V12 to the Veyron, and all the way towards the Chiron, where the quad turbo W16 massively prevailed. And well, it is RIP to the quad turbo W16, and hello there to the all new NA-V16. And I mean, guys, the sound is properly addictive for a 9500 RPM Redline for an 8.3 liter NA-V16. Well, you can't go wrong in any way whatsoever. And well, of course, Marty Rimac himself actually had the idea of completely creating an NA-V16 or a proper V16 on his own before he even became the CEO of Bugatti in 2021. And well, he has finally put that proper action into motion, and boy, is it a massive hit and a proper success, i.e. a W. And well, guys, there could have been nothing more suitable and nothing more worthy of being the Bugatti Chiron successor, none other than that of the all-new Bugatti Tourbillon. What with its looks and its complete aerodynamic prowess, with the complete superior aerodynamic profile than that of the Chiron, and the complete all-new dihedral door system, and with the complete all-new NA-V16 with a 9500 RPM Redline as its proper all-new power plant to properly open up to an all-new era of Bugatti. And well, I mean, nothing else could have been done to make this even more better. And of course, a massive hats off to Marty Rimac, and of course, a massive congratulations to the Bugatti team on properly creating this as the all-new Chiron replacement. And of course, this is not only the world's most powerful Bugatti, but also the most dynamic Bugatti ever made. I mean, especially with the complete proper look, the complete inspiration being taken from the Peregrine Falcon, with the complete proper immense downforce part, with the complete massive gaping vents of the Venturi tunnels. And well, what else could you ask for as a proper Chiron replacement? And well, guys, that's the all-new Bugatti Tourbillon. Well, what do you guys think? Comment below. And well, thanks a lot for watching. Remember to that sub button and click the bell to ensure you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks a lot for watching. See ya.